Good morning.
Morning.
How are you?
Hi, thank you.
My partner Ross Cooper is doing the majority of the talk today. So what I'd like to do is just introduce Ross. Ross has extensive experience working as a recruitment consultant. The business that we're working together is called Skills Assessment Academy. And what's slightly different about us is that we build tools for organizations to evaluate individuals and determine the values of the soft skills that are presented. We're trying to remove something that is a big issue that's already been noted a couple of times here, bias in an interview. The difference between what happens when you walk in the door and they like that smile, and when in fact the interview isn't about liking your smile or enjoying your handshake. The interview is about determining who's going to be able to do the best job for the organization and fit with the company. So what we're here to talk to you about today is trying to get you focused on the purpose of the interview, because two things happen. The recruiter has problems focusing on the purpose of the interview, and the applicant has problems on focusing on the purpose of the interview. So if you can understand that your part of it, getting that right, you're 50% of the way to getting the job. The fact that they're not going to get it right a lot of the time doesn't really have anything to do with anything you can control. And since it's outside your control, it's not really worth talking about. And so I'm going to pass you over to Ross Cooper, and he's going to give you a little talk on this. It's very interesting to hear what your ideas are. This is very interactive. Whatever you present, I think that Ross is okay with being interrupted.
Absolutely.
Because he gets used to it, because I interrupt him all the time. And so, there you go. Oh, I wanted to point out this is us, and this is the other thing. I went to an event, and we were looking at the event, and this is what you see whenever you go to a job fair. You see people who are wandering around like this, and they're looking for something. And what is interesting is that she's looking for a job, and she's oblivious to the fact that I'm taking a picture of her. Yeah. Most of the people who were there at the job fair were oblivious to the people who were on the other side of the stand. They just didn't notice them. And it's important to understand that when you walk through the door, when you go anyplace, that people are actually watching you. And so today I hope you might take some thinking about that for a minute. Okay. Enjoy it. There you go. But thanks, Paul.
Okay. The purpose of interview, we're gonna look at this from both sides of the table, as it were. We're gonna look at the purpose of an interview, obviously from a candidate's point of view, but we're also going to look at it from the company's point of view. Because sometimes, and it came out actually as you were going through, I think, sorry, I forgot your name. Damien mentioned, I wish I could read the person's mind. I wish I could understand what they're thinking, because then I'd know how to sell myself better, or where to pitch myself, I think was the point you're making. And a couple of other people mentioned things about, on the first 10, 15 seconds, that they've already decided something, or whether they like me or they don't like me, or, whether... So I suppose what we're trying to do is to look at and getting a better understanding of what we're all trying to achieve from that interview. Interviews, as a general rule, take about 45 minutes. That's how much time a recruiter will allocate per interview. And it's roughly broken down as follows. There's about 20 to 30 minutes, which is designed to go through your CV, your experience. There's 5 to 10 minutes, which is for them to explain in more detail the role, the company, and the opportunity for you. And about 5 or 10 minutes is allocated for questions from the candidates. From the company's point of view, there's 3 things that they're trying to achieve when they're conducting an interview. Okay? The first one of those is to sell their organization. Yeah? They want to make sure that you want to come and work for them. The second thing they're going to look at is assessing you as the candidate. So assessing your skills, your experience, And the third one is the most important one at an interview stage, which is the company fit. Now the reason why it's the most important one is very simple. These first two, the selling of the company to make sure you want to come to work for them, and making sure that you have the skill set. If you're at an interview, it's safe to assume that you're interested in coming to work for that organization. If you've been called to an interview, you haven't been rang up out of the blue, you've sent a CV, they've already seen your experience, so they should already know, provided obviously they still need to assess that experience matches what you've said on your CV. But this is what their focus is on. The company fit is the terminology that's used, but the reality is it's about how long you're likely to stay in the role. Okay, I think it was yourself, Damien, mentioned, somebody said to you they didn't put you forward for a role because they were worried you'd be bored after a week. Okay, but that's a complete reality, because the truth of any circumstance is that interview it's not something that companies want to do. Companies don't want to be hiring staff. Line managers are in an interview, that means they're taking away from their core job, their core responsibility, which is whether it's production, whether it's accounts, whatever department they've come from, sales, doesn't matter. That's what their core job is. So the fact that they've had to come in and conduct interviews, and the reality is that in this day and age, normally you're not talking about one interview, you're talking about a short list which can be anywhere from 3 to 5 up to 10 interviews conducted, depending on how their screening process is working.
14,
14, yeah, if you're Google, but under normal circumstances. So it's a huge burden for the line managers to be conducting interviews, and they don't really want to be there. So the last thing they want is to be back in that situation in 3-6 months' time. Make sense? Okay. From the candidate's point of view, the most important thing you should be thinking of is what you want to demonstrate. Okay? Ron mentioned the girls walking around in the job fair. Yeah? You are demonstrating something all the time that you're in that interview. So it's about you being aware of what you demonstrate and what you are trying to demonstrate. Now if I look at what you demonstrate, there are 3 core things that you demonstrate the entire time that you're in an interview. You're demonstrating your skills, your knowledge, and your identity. Your skills. Your skills can range anywhere. I mean, obviously, there are very obvious skills in terms of if I'm a computer programmer, if I'm able to develop in C++, that's a particular skill. If I'm an accountant, it's about being able to look at the books and be able to draw up a trading profit and loss account from it and extract a balance sheet as a result. But your skills are also in terms of your communication ability, your ability to type. Whatever those skills are, you need to be aware of what skills you're trying to demonstrate and making sure that you actually are demonstrating those during your interview. Your knowledge. Your knowledge obviously is your is gained predominantly from your experience, may also be from education. Somebody mentioned the fact that they were starting a new path. Was it you? No, it was you, was it? Sorry, hi. So your knowledge is going to be predominantly based on your education in that area or the training that you've been given in the area. Your identity. Identity is one of these areas where, well actually, before we get into too much on that, your identity is you basically, right? It's the type of person you are. Some people will call it personality traits, some people will call it attributes that you have, but that's all boils down into your identity. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, hopefully if this works, sorry, 1 second there.
Technology.
Yeah. See, this is not one of my skills. I'm going to look at a quick film here, which which is just some standard questions that come up in interviews and common mistakes that people made. So hopefully this is going to work.
Come on. Okay, so tell me a little bit about yourself. Well, I'm from Florida. I'm married. I got one
Technology
kid,
is
dog.
pain.
Sorry, we've got an awful lot of, that was quite deep. Did
Yeah.
anyone hear any of that?
Those guys on the screen look real familiar.
Did it? Yeah. I'll apologize for this. One of my skills is not acting, by the way, right? So,
No, but,
I thought I saw you on one page.
yeah.
That's why.
I'm going to the gym. Say
I
four.
can't get this. Stop. Where's your mouse? No, it's, you have a stop button on that letter, not H.
okay.
Let's try it again.
All right, we're going to try this again. Apologies for that.
Come on.
Do you hear that better?
Okay, so tell me a little bit about yourself. Well, I'm from Florida. I'm married. I got one kid, dog, cat, the whole thing. You know, we got. I do a lot of mountain walking. And I enjoy a lot of outdoor activities, and mostly in the summertime and everything. But during the winter, I guess I do a lot of reading. And, okay.
Okay. So the question was, tell me about yourself. Yeah? What did you tell me? He's from Florida, he's married, he has kids, he's got dogs, a cat, he likes hill walking or mountain climbing or reading and yeah. Okay.
Nothing to do
So what
with
did he
the job.
demonstrate?
Nothing to do with his job.
Absolutely nothing, right? What do I know about Ron having gone through that in relation to? I know he's a nice fella. Okay, we'll take that. That's great.
Too relaxed for the job.
Yeah, well, no idea, right? Absolutely no idea. And it's a common mistake that people make, which is, tell me about yourself. And it is a question that gets asked 90% of the interviews that you attend, and it serves a purpose, which is to try and get you to relax a little bit, okay? But he's told me nothing in relation to anything that would make me want to hire him.
That's my real answer, guys. That's really what I would have done.
Okay, so let's look at take 2 on it and see if. Here we go.
So, tell me a little bit about yourself. Well, really, I'm a natural leader in business, and it comes out of my identity. My personality is very much about focusing on leading people to the best solutions for themselves. So I've been in leadership and management since I was 18, and I've got a lot of roles around leading teams of people. I guess the biggest thing about me is my desire to inspire. And so I've been involved in training and involved in management, and it's always about getting other people to perform at their best. So, perfect. Good.
Okay. So, first of all, did he still answer the question? Tell me about yourself. Yeah,
Yes.
he did.
Yeah.
But he related it to the role or to his work life. Yeah? So he told us that he likes being involved in team leaders, in management, in training, trying to inspire, trying to get the best out of other people. Okay, great. At least it's relevant to what I'm interested in. Yeah? We can see a difference. This is yes, by the way, yeah? Yes.
They're all looking at him going, they still wouldn't hire him. But it doesn't really matter that whether, if you look at the one that is presented as a wrong answer on these, then that's fine. If you look at the other ones, please don't look at them as being the right answer, because they're not. No, there's no such thing as a right answer. There's more about you.
Sorry, yeah.
Basically, throughout the second example there, he held one single theme throughout it, right? It was just leadership,
Yeah.
which was fantastic for the fact it built an image. It's one thing you can take away from the answer, except having multiple little things, you had one thing. And you stayed to it the whole time, right? So
It's because I don't have a great deal of ability, so I have to concentrate on
But it's
one
fine,
thing at a time.
he concentrated on what he wanted them to get out of it. That's the point. It's not about that you have to go in and say, I want to inspire people. It's about what he was trying to demonstrate and making sure that that came across.
We'll tell you more about that later.
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully this is just going to play.
Continuing this previous role. Basically, it's because my manager was a bit of a tyrant. He was always on my back, and I just couldn't take it, you know. And did he was there any reason given? Oh, it was on everything. Everything that we did, there was an issue with, you know. And in the end, I agreed to resign because it was unreasonable. But he was pushing me, you know, through HR because I had been late 3 times. And that was, you know, it's like, and it was totally unreasonable because there was no way I could get there, you know, and on time with traffic and everything. It was up on Foster's Avenue, and it just like couldn't get there on time, you know. And he couldn't accept that. He started screaming for no reason at all. Yeah, the guy was like that.
That could have been the first 15 seconds.
Okay. So, the question was, why did you leave your previous role?
Never mention about your ex-boss.
What did he do? Yeah, that's all he did. I didn't ask him what was your ex-boss like. And if I did, that still wouldn't be the answer I would recommend giving, by the way. But
That was my answer. I disliked my boss. I hated him. I couldn't stand the guy.
okay,
No
but like,
flexibility.
but the reality
It
is,
happened that the guy would know your interviewer.
yeah, absolutely. You don't know. Like Ireland is a very small place. You'd be amazed at how many times that people will know people who from your previous companies. But the reality is that he didn't actually answer the question. He told me, okay, the only time he did mention that there was an issue in terms of he was late a few times. And that was to do with being over on Foster's Avenue or something like that. But that wasn't what he talked about. What he talked about was his ex-boss. Okay, the fact that we all know that we shouldn't be ragging on the ex-boss, but anyway, let's see a more positive spin on the.
Okay, so tell me, why did you leave your previous role? Actually, I left the business is over on Foster's Avenue, and because of the situation between my wife and myself, the way that our hours have changed, and our daughter moving to another school, what's happening is that I can't get to work without getting caught up in the traffic every morning going over to that area because the hours that are set, and they're very set hours of the company, are 9 to 5. And that means basically that I would have to leave at 7:30 in the morning in order to get there for the 9 to 5, and I can't leave before 5 o'clock. And so in reality, it was about looking for a better job and a better location for me. Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, so we still know he got fired because he was late, right? Or because he couldn't get there on time. But at least he didn't start ragging on about the ex-boss, right? He talked about it as, why did he leave the last role? Because the location was wrong. Okay, like there's no point in lying. Like the reality is that before I'm going to hire this guy, I'm going to check references anyway. So I'm going to find out that the reason he left that role was because of tiredness or lateness, whatever you want to call it, right? But at least he's given me an explanation why that was an issue. And he's focused on the issue, which is the lateness or the location of the previous, as opposed to getting tied up in, my boss was mean to me, he didn't like me, I don't even know some of the other terminology that he used in it, but he was a psychopath. Yeah, that did come up, I was trying not to focus on it. But look, the reality is that this question is always going to have a negative connotation to it. So there's no point in me standing up here and saying, oh, be positive, be positive. If it was great, you wouldn't have left. So something went wrong along the line that caused you to leave that previous role. And we will all have roles, I'm sure, somewhere in our CV that we left because of a bad reason. Whether that is a location, whether it's an ex-boss, whatever that is. It's about putting a positive spin and not focusing purely on the negative side of it. Yeah? Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Let's see, what question came up next? That's not right.
And what are your salary expectations? I don't know. I really, the whole market's changed. Yeah, so I just want a job. Okay.
How many of you don't want to say that?
Okay, we've all been there, right? And it is, it's, look, salary expectations, actually, I'm going to let the second example of it play first, and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah. So, what are your salary expectations? Well, basically, the range that you were advertising was between 35 and 45, and I see myself pretty much in the middle there, someplace. But it would be towards the 45 there.
Okay, that's the easiest way around it. A lot of us don't like answering salary expectations, partly because our salary range, or the range we have in our mind, may differ hugely. There may be a vast difference between what we will be willing to accept and what we're actually going to be happy to work at, or what the level that we feel that we should be earning.
And you mentioned the fact that somebody said that they weren't going to be paying enough for you to do that job.
Without me telling my previous salary,
It's fine to throw a question back at people when they say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when they turn around and say that they're paying $22.50, there's nothing wrong with turning around saying, yeah, that is a bit low,
figure she had in mind I wouldn't
Yeah.
work for.
but I would work for it.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the reality is, okay,
€70 an hour.
what Ron did there was he actually avoided answering the specific question. What he did was he threw it back at the interviewer and he said, okay, well, what's the salary range on the role? Okay, the salary range on the role is between 35 and 45. I'd be happy to work within that range. I'd like to see myself towards the 45 part of it. Yes.
How normal is it to get to the interview stage without any salary having been mentioned?
It can happen. It shouldn't.
Well, I wouldn't go for an interview if I had no
It
idea
shouldn't.
what the
Yeah,
salary
you
was.
should at least know the salary range prior to the interview.
Right.
They'll still ask you.
But they will ask you. So the easiest way is just to make sure that you have to be within that salary range. When a job spec is created in a company, it is created with a salary range attached to it. So there is no point. If you go in, doesn't matter how great you are, if you're not within that salary range, you're not going to get chosen.
When we train the different levels of interviewer that you see, there's a junior interviewer, there's a middle interviewer, and there's a senior interviewer. The junior interviewers that you see have a tick sheet. They have to go through, there are a certain number of questions, there are certain questions that must be asked. Those questions that are asked, yeah, they have to tick them off the list. They have to have an answer written down to them. Okay? It doesn't matter the fact that you applied for a job that pays between 35 and 45. They have to write down how much. They have to ask.
They will still have it on as one of their questions is the point. So you will still get asked it, even though, yes, you're right. Most roles, if you're getting to interview stage, it should have come up already, if you've been called to an interview. But if it hasn't, and there are times when, you'll get answers like depends on experience. Yeah? Has everyone...
Yeah.
Yeah, we've all had that at some point, right? Where they don't want to give you the salary range out front. What they want to do is they want to be able to gauge what the salary levels. And in particular, for example, now where we've had what we'll call a salary adjustment in the last few years, salary levels have dropped, right? From where they were, certainly where they were 3-4 years ago. So they will look at it in terms of where the market sits, but they will still have a salary range. So if you don't know it, that's the easiest way, rather than ruling yourself out of an interview by saying, well look, I want 50k and the role is only paying up to 45. Easiest way around it is, okay, well what's the salary range on the role? They may not have a salary on the role, but they will have a salary range. Yeah?
I mean, you always have the dilemma, you don't want to sell yourself too cheap, and you
Absolutely.
don't want to price yourself out.
Exactly.
So what would be the normal sort of range? 10, 20,000 range?
There will normally be at least a 10K range, depending on the level of the role. Obviously, if it's a very junior role, that range might be much smaller. If it moves into a more senior level, you may have 20 grand in the difference in terms of the salary range. But if you know the salary range, then you can avoid pitching yourself outside of it. Either side of it, by the way. Yeah, absolutely. The last thing you want to do is go in and go, oh, you know what, yeah, I'm looking for 40 grand, and you realise that actually the salary range was 40 to 50, and then you're going, oh, Jesus, I should have gone, I should have been able to pitch myself that a little bit higher.
Sorry, can I add something there?
Yes.
In Aer Lingus, salaries never discussed with the interview. We would drop even a wonderful CV if they were prepared to attempt for interview if they didn't pay the salary. And then when the interview did go, that when you gave your salary expectation, okay, if you said a high one and if you were prepared to offer lower, if the job had been sized at a lower amount, we would offer you the job at such a salary, and then it's up to you to accept it or not.
I've had the dilemma that you get quoted a basic and then the famous OTE, you know. You try and get them to be more precise about what can I realistically expect in commission, and it's there I've had huge problems.
Yeah.
Because their expectations and yours are
On target earnings is one of these terminologies that gets bandied around, and it basically means I can quote you anything. I can say the OTE for a job is $500,000. Is if I set you unrealistic targets that you can never achieve. So when you get that, the easiest way around it is to say, okay, what's your average? What are your guys earning at the moment? And get some figures. Say, okay, what's the top guy earning at the moment? Because if the top guy is only earning the OTE,
It's not top line.
then that would tell you that those OTE figures aren't realistic. So what you really want to know is, what does the average guy make?
And what do they fire somebody at?
And at what level do they consider this isn't viable? Because the level that they consider isn't viable, and where that average is probably what you want to look at. Because the reality is that you're not going to, most people are going into any, in particular in a sales kind of an environment, you're not going to be the top performer in the first 3 months, because you've got to build your sales pipeline. So you need to look at where those other two figures are. The OTE figure, yeah, that's great for down the road. What you need to look at is, what's your top guy earning? At what level do I start a disciplinary procedure? And at what level is the average within there? And that'll give
you have absolutely no check on that.
No, you don't. But at least if you ask them, you're managing their expectations and you're asking them to manage yours.
Right.
And this is getting back to what we were talking about earlier on in terms of they don't want to be recruiting for your position again in 3 months' time. So if it's not in their best interest to tell you, okay, the average guy is earning 60 grand, because as soon as you start, you're going to find out, well, actually the average guy is only earning 45 grand. Then all of a sudden, where are they? They're back recruiting again.
Right.
Are you going to move into negotiation on the full package, like in the States, you can ask for a sign-on bonus if you don't accept the salary?
Yeah, you can do.
According to the role.
It depends on the level of role you're looking at.
Yeah.
It will depend on the level that you're looking at, is the short answer to it.
If you're replaced to a hotel for a half.
Profit.
Okay.
And did you have any questions for me? I think you pretty much answered everything in the beginning. When it came and it's all from jobs and everything else. Okay. All right, thanks for coming in. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. So, do you have any questions for me?
You didn't hire him.
No, I didn't. He is sitting there, so it's slightly misleading, but no, we wouldn't have hired him in that circumstance. Okay. Do we have any questions for me? No, thanks. I got all I got. Okay. What you need to remember here, guys, is that an interview is a sales process. Yeah? So you're selling yourself, they're selling themselves. If somebody, the other day I got a phone call from Aircom Phone Watch, right? And he was trying to get me to hook up one of these monitored alarm things, right? Now, If I'm interested after his spiel, how many times am I going to go, that's great, sign me up? No. 9 times out of 10, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have some questions for him, yeah? They're what in sales terms they call buying signals. They're expressions of interest. Yeah? Make sense? Okay. So if I'm interested...
On the phone it's very different because body language doesn't come into the equation,
Yeah.
you know.
But that's an opportunity for you to express your interest. Any questions for me? Yeah? Do you have any questions?
What is the next step in the process?
Okay, that's fine. It's a positive question. It's a buying signal. It shows me that he's interested in pursuing the opportunity.
When they say, tell me about yourself, how long should you typically talk for? 1-2 minutes? I mean...
I would, yeah, there's no problem with that. I wouldn't go into a 10-minute monologue if that's what you're asking.
Right?
No, they're not.
Well, how much do you have to say about your relevance to that position, and how long can you talk about your relevance to that position? Even if you've been working 40 years in the industry, you don't really have a lot to say until you know a lot more about them. So.
Okay.
Anyway, it's a valid point. We'll touch on it in a minute. Let's just see, did he improve?
So, do you have any questions for me? Yeah, actually, I wanted to get an idea more about the culture of the company and the type of team size that I'd be working with.
Okay. So, what did he ask? He wanted to know about the culture of the company and about the size of the team he was going to be working in. What does that tell us?
He's interested. Very interested.
Yeah, he's already positioning himself in that role.
wanna
He's
know
imagining
if you're
himself.
walking.
So if I'm there, how many? Sorry, I didn't walk across it up there anyway. How many people am I going to be dealing with? What's the company culture? Or do you go out together? Do you socialize? It doesn't really matter. There isn't. You know, with the exception of how many sick days am I entitled to, there aren't really any bad questions. You know, but it's important to be asking the questions, and ask the questions that are relevant. As a general rule, you should always have a few questions prepared, because if you go in there with one question, what happens if they answer it while you're talking? Then what do you say? Yeah, so it's always a good idea to have a few questions beforehand in terms of, some people find it easier to talk off the cuff than others. Some people in an interview find that they lose track and kind of go off on tangents. So it's a good idea to have a set plan in terms of knowing what, yes?
A question like that.
Yes.
Company culture one, it's a very easy one. Are softball questions like that okay? Are they, do you need to be trying to make the interviewer think? Or is it just okay to just throw softball questions up and say, just like you said,
Yeah, as I say, there's two purposes of what we're trying to achieve here. One is an expression of interest, right? That's the fundamental thing that we're trying to achieve. The second thing, and this is where, and I've seen people trip themselves up, they kind of think, oh yeah, you know, I ask, they go in and go, okay, so yeah, the company, this and that. The other thing, they kind of go, hang on a minute, did you not do any research about the company beforehand? So you can trip yourself up by trying to be too clever with it.
My favorite one was, how long before I could be sitting in your seat? Yeah.
Never.
That's a realistic answer, yeah. Okay, so, but the key is in terms of is what you're trying to demonstrate, yeah? And that's the key to think about. The other thing, and somebody touched on it earlier on, the purpose from your point of view is, does this role or the company suit me? Is it the right environment for me? We get very caught up in the idea that I'm there to sell myself to this organization, and of course you are. Of course, that's the first and main purpose of going for the interview. Somebody mentioned earlier on, the purpose of going to an interview is to get a job. Yeah, well, I would suggest the purpose of going to the interview is to get a job offer. Okay, so there is a slight difference. What you also need to determine is this the right company or the right role for me? Am I going to be happy in this environment? Is this somewhere where I can see myself for the next at least 6 months?
But in a balanced way, yeah, so anyhow, because if you notice my examples of what I did wrong, and those were all based around me wanting to express to them who I was, what my issues were, what my life was like, so that I could decide so they could make a decision as to whether or not to hire me based on making me happy. And, which is really sad, because that's how you don't get a job.
The other thing that we haven't touched on during this process, the third wheel, are agencies. Now the reason why I've left them till here is that they have become less important in the process than they were certainly 10 years ago. You had a situation where probably 80–90% of roles involved agencies. Now, depending on who you want to believe, those statistics are somewhere between 10 and 35%. But they do serve a purpose. They can make negotiating an awful lot easier. They can give you an awful lot of information that you may or may not feel comfortable asking company directly for. The important thing to remember when you're talking about recruitment agencies is to understand what the purpose of the recruitment agency is. Okay? The recruitment agency is not a HR consultancy firm for you. Okay? The recruitment agent has three things that they're going to look at. They're going to look at, they want to assess and increase the chance of them getting a fee. They want to confirm your suitability for the roles that they have for their clients. And they want to understand your skill set better. That's why they've called you in for an interview. One of those three reasons. Possibly all three. But you have to remember that their fee is determined on them making the company happy, not you. So they're not there. You know, I had a conversation with somebody after the event in Dunleary on Wednesday. And she said to me, you know, I was out doing some temp work for a friend of mine, got a call from an agency, and they were asking me, was I available? And I said, well, I'm not available to go for an interview and do this temp work. And they asked her where she's doing it, she told them. And then she was shocked and appalled that the agency rang that company and said, are you looking for staff? By the way, if that was my recruitment agency and he didn't make that call, I'd fire him. Because he's useless as a recruitment agent if he doesn't make that call. So the recruitment agent is not there as your friend. You can get some valuable advice from them. You can certainly get advice in terms of your CV, in terms of interview techniques, and it can be a free facility that you can use because you're not paying them. They're getting their money from the companies. But bear that in mind. The company is their loyalty. That's where their loyalty will always be because that's the person who pays them. But they will give you advice in terms of CV advice, in terms of interview tips. They will give you an idea in terms of the market and how it sits at the moment. And they'll also be able to help you in terms of where you should be pitching yourself from a salary expectations point of view. They will be able to tell you, well look, you know what, if you're pitching yourself at this level, you're ruling yourself out of X, Y, and Z job, or you're competing, it's too expensive for you, you should look at this. And they'll give you those salary ranges in terms of where you should pitch yourself based on your skills and your experience.
Do beware of advisors.
Absolutely. 100%, I agree with that. Well, just the thing to be aware of, there's two things, right? One is they will give you advice based on their experience, and that's all anybody can do, right? So what you have to bear in mind with a recruitment agent is that their advice, remember what will be based on increasing their chance of a fee, okay? So a recruitment agent is likely to talk down your salary expectations because then that opens up more opportunities. Now, if you're happy with the reduced level, that's fine. But just bear in mind that the reason they need to reduce down your salary level is because they have to include a fee to the company when looking at the cost of bringing you on board through an agency, yeah? So it's important to bear that in mind as well. The other...
Sorry,
yeah, sorry.
Last question. So let's say we're going for a job that's 50 grand, right? And let's my understanding of the way the process works. I mean, please correct me because I think I am wrong. But my understanding of the way the process works is if a company's going to hire somebody that's worth 50 grand in the market,
yeah,
they're going to hire them they're going to pay them 50 grand regardless.
Yes.
Whether they go directly but they got the recruit names.
Correct.
And the reason why is just because that's what the market will bear. So they'll pay maybe 10 grand more going to the recruitment agency.
Yes.
But at the same time, they're not going to give you that 10 grand because you went direct.
No, they're not. They're not. You're right. No, you are correct in that. No, the point I'm making is that a recruitment agency has to make their candidates appealing to their clients. Okay? So if you're looking for a 50 grand role, and you have, so the reality is that you're going for roles that are between, we'll say, 45 and 55k, give or take, right? If the recruitment agent can talk to you and say, look, if you go in there at 45k, you increase your chances. Of course you do. In the same way as you increase your chances going directly and going in at 45k. The reality is that when companies are looking at the costs of hiring, they will include the fact that if I have to hire somebody through an agency, like it's very seldom now in particular that companies will only recruit through agencies. So if they're looking at your CV through an agency and they're looking at Ronald's CV and he's applied directly, they will factor in the overall cost. That's the point I'm making.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
I follow you.
Well, once again, most of the time it's outside of your control.
Yeah.
So it's like it's not a big worry point.
No, the only point I'm making is in terms of if you're looking for them in terms of advice on salary expectations, just bear in mind that you can probably they will try and undersell you slightly to make you more appealing to the market. Now that's fine. If that's what you're looking for is to open up more opportunities, but just don't feel under undue pressure to lower your salary expectations to a point where you're not going to be happy going in and doing the role. That's kind of the key to it, yes, sorry.
Slightly off topic, but maybe or maybe not, and that is dealing with recruitment agencies and formulating a CV.
Yes.
And it's around this thing of understanding your skill set.
Yeah.
In that, I get the impression that they very often don't understand skill sets.
Quite possibly,
The
yeah.
level one interviewer that Ron was talking about a moment ago, and that they're working with a checklist, and therefore you're presenting your CV, and the issue that I have encountered is that if I formulate my CV to get past this screener, whether it's in an agency or whether it's the person in HR who knows heck all about the nitty-gritty of the role, that's great. And then the line manager takes one look at it from a completely different perspective, and it's the wrong CV.
Okay.
If you could bypass stage one, you rearrange the content, you present the stuff that the line manager, the hiring manager is interested in, but if you start off with that CV, it doesn't get through the stage one interview.
That's where a recruitment agency sometimes comes in very handy, is in specific industries, specific sectors, specific companies. Dell want their CVs formatted in a particular way. Oracle want theirs formatted in a particular way. The only way you're going to get pat through the whole process is to have the CV formatted to fit them. You can't guess it yourself. There's no way of guessing. That's why this idea that you can have a perfect CV is false.
I write a different CV for every job.
Sorry, it's not.
The top half of the first page, the bit that shows on a computer screen without being scrolled is always different. Always different.
Yeah, it's about tailoring your CV for the role that you're going for, I think. The last thing, and this seems to be an issue for some people, competency-based interviews. Yeah? People seem to get caught up in it because of the fact that when they're in an interview process, they get asked a question, okay, can you give me an example of a time when you had to deal with an internal conflict, or when you had to deal with, and these are the core areas, the core competencies that the majority of competency-based interviews are around. Communication and interpersonal skills, analytical or strategic thinking, organizing or planning, using your own initiative, conflict resolution, and developing others in teamwork. Now, they will not all appear on every competency-based interview because different roles will have different core competencies that they are looking for. You should always know prior to going into an interview if it's going to be a competency-based interview. If they don't tell you, I would always recommend asking. Okay? Because the last thing you want, the key to competency-based interviews is to be prepared. Now, does that mean you need to remember 12 different stories? No, of course not. You don't need to have 12 different examples. What you should look at is, and this is why I have down here, plan and remember what you want to demonstrate. Okay? So, look at the core competencies they are looking for and pick 2 or 3 stories that ideally that touch on one or more of those core competencies. And that way, there's nothing wrong with using the same story. You can change the emphasis on it if you understand it. I had somebody say to me at one of the events, well, should just make it up. That's fine. If you are that polished at delivering lies off the top of your head, right? Most people get themselves caught up when the key is, if you're going to do it, make sure you're good at it. And I mean that 100%. You need to be brilliant at it, because when people start asking you questions on it, are you going to know the background information for it? You need to build up. So my general advice on this is stick to the truth. It's easier to remember. Yeah?
He doesn't like my opinion on it. Yeah? And the interesting thing is there's nothing wrong with the fact that people will have different opinions about things around how to go through an interview. Whereas in my opinion, that if you don't have experiences of something, I tell people I don't have experience, or I can't think of an experience where that happened before. So the guy asked me, he said, you know, an employee is bitten by a snake in the middle of the working day, you have a project that has to get out on time, you know, do you see to the employee that's been bitten by the snake, or do you make sure the project got completed? And I would say,
Kill the snake.
okay.
Well,
No, I don't, in my particular experience, I've never had an issue with a snake biting a person. But in normal practice, I would have somebody who was structured within my organization to take care of an emergency first aid issues around the floor in the first place. Secondly, if it did happen and that person wasn't available, what I would do is I would appoint and designate the next person responsible in the organization and to take over the operation, and I would see the person who did the mistake, because for me, it's the employee first, yeah? Before you look after the customer, you have to look after the employee. If you aren't looking after your employees, then the business is sunk. And so, and that would be my answer. But once again, that would be all referring back to the job spec in the first place, because as a line manager, they have to have
You
SAP.
just need to show them that you can manage the situation even if you didn't have
yeah,
experience.
by the way, there's,
So,
And I made that all up in my mind
yeah.
at the time. Yeah, it wasn't a lie, it was
yeah,
just
they
my
appreciate
imagination.
more if you tell some barriers or situation that you never dealt before.
Yeah, look, there's nothing wrong with saying I haven't dealt with this situation, I haven't had that situation come up, but
Yeah.
when, or bring it into a personal, yeah, this is how I would deal with it if it came up. If you can't come up with something. But the key is, if you know what the core competencies are that they're going to ask is, and that's about planning beforehand, then there's no reason why. And the key is that you should always try to make sure that you are explaining the situation, the action that you took, the results that you got, and the learning from it. So there's nothing wrong with saying, oh, actually what I did was wrong. You know, if you're asked, okay, how did you deal with conflict resolution that occurred? There's nothing wrong with saying, okay, well, this is how I did it at the time, but actually, I shouldn't have, I've now learned from that, and because it's not really about what you did, it's about, do you understand what you should do? Do you know how to, it goes back to what we were looking at earlier on, what you're trying to demonstrate, yeah? So your knowledge on that front is, do you know the right thing to do? Ron made an interesting point the other day. The incompetent person is the person who doesn't realize they don't know. If you realize that you don't know something, then you're competent. Because you're aware of your deficiency. If that makes sense.
Yes.
Or at least you're consciously competent, or unconsciously incompetent.
Yeah, they're the dangerous ones.
Consciously incompetent.
Consciously incompetent,
Yeah.
yeah.
And therefore there is hope for
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. At least you're aware of the fault.
Unconsciously incompetent is the position that we look for when we're in recruiting. And so we look to see whether you're unconsciously incompetent, and then we evacuate from, you know.
I used to work in the jungle of Sumatra, so I came across snakes all the time.
Yeah,
Right,
there we go.
you're hired.
Yeah.
You're our first aid guy for Ron's floor. Okay,
Tyson.
yes,
I'm
Dave.
I'm going to take a slight issue with the thing of whether you lie or not for those
Yes.
questions. For the very simple reason, if you lie successfully,
Yes.
it's the road to disaster.
Ah.
And take, for example, the snake situation,
Right.
where you decide that the right answer to give is that you looked after the employee first
Yeah.
and took your chances with the customer. And they think, yes, Ron's the man for the job, that's exactly the right thing to do. But the truth of the matter is, you lied.
Yeah.
Your instinct was to hell with your colleague, look after the customer first.
Yeah.
You get into the job, and you don't give a damn about your colleagues, you don't fit.
Yeah.
They're not happy, you're not happy,
Yeah.
the customers aren't really happy at the end of the day. So I am firmly opposed to
Yeah. No, the-
lying.
see, the issue is-
The interview is for both of you to see.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a fit.
The idea behind competency-based questions are to evaluate whether or not you have the knowledge to perform within the skill. Yeah, so in other words, your understanding. So they're looking to know whether you know that that's the right way or the wrong way. The problem is in performance is it's about execution. Execution is where people lose their jobs. It's where you lose your jobs. It's not where you don't get hired. Yeah. Not getting hired is what we're dealing with today. And the issue about competency and being able to perform well is a different question altogether. And it's something that's trainable for most people. Most organizations can actually get you to the right place if you have the right identity structure. So, it's a different question.
Yes.
The way that you have to reply to the competency-based question.
Yes.
It's called the STAR technique.
There's lots of different versions of it, but yeah.
Situation, task, action, and results.
Be
And
very
that's a
careful
very
about
good way to-
everything
Well,
you
well,
get from advice.
Yeah. The one thing I would add to that is learning. Okay? Your start
Yeah.
technique, learning. What did you gain from it? Because if that isn't there, that means that your answer has to be the perfect answer beforehand. And the problem is that your idea of a perfect answer, my idea of a perfect answer, and everybody else in this room's idea of a perfect answer will differ slightly. So unless you're going to know the mind trick in terms of what exactly they're looking for, the key is the learning from the experience.
Yeah.
If you don't have the learning from the experience, then it's just an experience. And I would suggest that's what we would refer to as a bad experience. You should always learn from every experience, even if the only thing you learn is I don't ever want to have that experience again.
Can I just mention one thing about these techniques that you may learn from people at the moment? Be very, very careful. We talk about unconsciously incompetent. Okay? The next level is being consciously incompetent. That's the level you are at once you learn a technique. When you're learning the technique, you are unconscious, or you are consciously incompetent. You know that you don't have it perfect. Yeah. Lots of people go into interviews now at the moment because of the fact that you get so few of them, and try to practice something that they're thinking about a technique of going through the interview rather than thinking about the purpose of the interview. If you focus back on the purpose of the interview, you're far more likely to get the job than you are if you're focusing on a STAR technique. That's what I would tell you. Now,
Well, I speak about the STAR technique just because it's a way that you have to reply.
Yeah.
The way that I prepare for an interview, I don't try to look at all the questions that the interviewer can do and how I can reply to them, but I just focus in the answer actually. And then my answer, I will fit in any question. My answer will be, okay, I'm competent in these three things, and that's the three things that I know that I need to do. So, okay, so how can I improve? You know, the way that they ask you, oh, what's your three best skills? I'm not only telling, oh, I'm organized, I know language, but I'm telling actually, oh yeah, I am organized because in my previous job I did this, there were this situation, so task. I came up with, well, then the action, okay, I did this action and the result. So it's just a way for me to formulate my answer to the question.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah.
If you figure out a structure to do that. The problem is that what's happened recently is people keep turning up for interviews with me, and they have canned approaches to the interview. And when you come in with a canned approach to the interview and everything, nothing smells worse than a previously opened can. You know, it's like it really doesn't help people. And a lot of people are coming in with these what they think are good structures from and they're not working out for them. So just be very careful about following a structure or path.
Yeah, no, I think the point you're making is, and I'm familiar with the start, it's just a technique in terms of how to structure your answer to make sure that you're ticking off the boxes. So that's
Make
fine.
sure that you're telling all the
That you're
things.
covering
Not only,
both,
I am
yeah.
organized because that, but at least you
Yeah,
say
yeah,
why
yeah,
and
it's
what's the
fine.
situation.
Yeah, the point that Ron's making, I think, is more about the overall kind of, you have to be careful of sounding too scripted. Because the whole idea, and it goes back to the first question that we were asked, was tell me about yourself. The purpose of the interview from the client's point of view, from the company's point of view, is to try and understand how much of a fit there is there. And this is where, when you come in with an overly scripted response to everything, you do run the risk of them feeling like they're not actually getting to know you at all. Does that make sense? Okay.
Start is a useful technique.
It is very useful for competency-based.
Yeah, for picking the right examples.
Yeah.
Because when you're doing the preparation, if you can't, an example comes to mind, and then when you try and apply the stars to it, you realize, actually, no, that wasn't a great example, and you'll go for a better one. And then you can tell the tale as it comes naturally. You don't have to.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you're going to try something like that, if you're going to try a technique, make sure that you're not in the incompetent stage of use of that technique when you step into the interview. If you're walking into an interview trying to impress with somebody with something that you haven't practiced, you're not going to do well.
Sorry, you had a question?
Informal interviews, informational interviews, even interviews that are framed in the form of a coffee. Basically, like I had an interview last Friday. It was meeting a friend for coffee, but it was, we met via, separate introduction, basically, just a coffee, right, knowing that this is a company I'd like to work for. What's your advice for preparing for these?
It shouldn't really change in terms of the core, which is you need to be aware of what you're trying to demonstrate.
Yeah.
Like that has to be the core, and you need to be able to think about what they're trying to get out. Like the fact that it's in an informal environment shouldn't change. I mean, I've had this experience before. I had a guy going for an engineering role, and he was doing it. He was going to be meeting for a coffee. It was an after hours. He was working for a large organization at the time, and as a result, because he was sitting down having a coffee in a hotel or in a bar, he used several expletives. And you're kind of going, hang on, just because it's an informal environment doesn't change what you're actually trying to achieve there, which is you're trying to get a role. It's still an interview, and so I would still approach it within reason, certainly with the same planning and foresight in mind, which is what am I trying to achieve, what am I going to demonstrate, what do I want to get out of it, and trying to understand the other side of that as well. Yes?
Would it give you a better opportunity to really interview them? Because it's not a formal interview, so you can find out a lot more about the job by asking them the questions. So if you go to the next level, you're 100% prepared for it. I would always say that what you're doing is you're asking them, what are you looking for? What's the role going to entail? And they're coming back to you all the time. You're jotting all this down. So if you go to the next stage, you're ready to go.
Was that a sales role that you were looking at?
No, it wasn't. It was actually an analytics role.
Okay, so same thing. They expect that you find out more about the type of questions you're going to ask, how you go through the process. It's unstructured in the fact that what they're doing is they're giving a lot of control back over to you during that opportunity, and so that you can walk them through and show them your stuff, because analytics is about your ability to walk through that process and about understanding, being able to take that, your thinking. So rather than directing the questions at you, it's a better process for them.
Yeah,
That would be my
yeah.
Okay. I screwed that one up always myself. It's like I used to drink and when I drink, you know, yeah, so people would ask you in a bar, you know, they could go to meet you in a bar and interview you, and then offer you to buy a drink, you know, and it's like, and the one thing you should know is, do you ever drink at interviews?
Okay. I'm guessing by the response we all know that, right? Okay.
I know.
Okay. All right?
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, Ron. I find it increasingly in the interviews type of thing, that they've upped the bar type of thing, that when they say, Jerry, do you know what about Oracle or J.D. Edwards or Sabrina Oxley, you know what she is? And/or problem-solving techniques. Now, in the area of I work in operations type of thing, I know most of them. I've seen loads of them lately, like TRIZ and 8Ls and GDs and TTCMs. And say, what the hell are they on about? They say, hold on a second, where's the period gone where a company took you in on board and trained you? Obviously the standard answer, I think the standard answer is as well, I've learned MS Project or Prince 2 or Word Excel, Visio, whatever I've learned everything, and say, well, obviously I can acquire these mathematical and/or computer techniques type of thing. When it comes to stuff like J.D. Edwards and stuff like that, because I asked a friend of mine who worked on it, he says, you know something, you really need to be in the company to be working on the system for about 6 months to get to know it properly.
Yeah.
And yet, no, sorry, he hasn't got it, hasn't got it, I think. You know, and yet, the job might be something like recently I went for a job I signed, and it was for a demand and operations manager, right? A demand planning, sorry, and operations management. But demand planning is one of 18 sections in operations management. It's easy enough, blah, blah, blah. It has limited appeal, limited techniques, whatever. I said, okay, that's what I do for the first 4 hours in the company. Done that, now what? I solved that problem, but, you know, and then just the job was, oh, you even rewrote the job wrong. Then I went into demand planning and being a planner and scheduling techniques and did it. Actually, you were looking for a scheduler. You're not looking for an operations guy at all. Operations guy to me is looking at everything. Looking at balance scorecard, whatever, doing that sort of overall technique.
Yeah.
But I find, I fall in, and I have no experience of Oracle at J.D. Edwards, don't know what even what they are, I think, you know, Sabina Edwards. It's just, how can I answer that question? Because they're going to put an X on me, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, the reality is that if you don't have the experience with it, you don't have it. So there isn't really anything. I mean, the easiest approach around it is to be able to focus on what you do bring to the, which is the fact that you've used all these other multitude of tools should tell them, and if it doesn't, you need to tell them that, look, I can get up to board quick, I can get up to speed quickly on whatever systems that you guys are using. It doesn't guarantee you the role, and the reality is that there will be, like, the reality is if it's what they consider a critical part of the role and you don't have it, they shouldn't be, in theory, they shouldn't be calling for it. If it's a deal breaker in terms of your experience, and if we go back to one of the slides earlier on that we looked at, which was assessing your CV and your experience. Now, it can be a case that somebody has, that you've ticked enough boxes on the HR or the internal recruiters page for them to merit, okay, well look, we have to call this guy in because of the experience that you're bringing.
Yeah, it is. It's just a case of, let's be sure and cast the net wide enough. Let's have a look at him. It's only costing me as an interviewer 45 minutes. It's taking a day out of my life. I said, hold on a second. You know, you just brought me along for just to see, compare me against the chap beside me. You know, that's a bit unfair to me. I know it's not an equal process, but I think, but you feel so
it can be very frustrating.
Yes, that's a company I'm not going to go back to work for, or wouldn't like to work for that thing. Just call me along and win, you know, and then ask me, no, but you did this. I said that in my CV. I didn't lie, you know.
Yeah, it is. It's very frustrating. I mean, the problem is that 9 times out of 10, the guy sitting across from you isn't the problem. The problem was somebody in administration, in HR, or in what they now call talent acquisition, and they have all these different terminologies. But basically, it's an internal recruiter somewhere who's put you through in terms of, because you ticked, he has a set criteria. This is what we were talking about earlier on in terms of the checkbox. And because you have a certain amount of experience in this, and this, he's automatically passed you through to the next stage of the process, which is that first round interview.
You got past the waiting system.
Yeah, it's a flaw in the system, but the problem is that doesn't help you, and it doesn't help the guy sitting on the other side of the table who's looking at it. And I guarantee you, he's feeling as frustrated as you are. He's sitting there going, You know what?
Just
Why?
wasted an hour.
I'm interviewing somebody who doesn't have the skills. This should have been picked up at a CV stage, at the CV screening.
25 of those hours a week in order to make
But even in that case, with the demand and operations manager, I said operations manager, demand and operations command planning. I says, hold on a second, 2 different roles effectively. I could do it as an operations guy, go in and do command planning, but that's it. 4 hours work, or days work, or weeks work, whatever it is. Check all the sales figures from what drive your analyze them, collate them, go back. I work out capacity planning or whatever I need to do that thing, run that, got that. Need to move on to the next problem. But that's not the way that you feel like saying, shit, do you even know what you're looking for? Type of thing.
They don't. But
the operations guy,
with a lot of things, and they see organization structure. The opportunity is that they probably lost their operations manager before they. And how often do you ask the operations manager to write out a job spec for himself before he leaves? You know, and so they're trying to figure out what the guy who was there before did, so that they can figure out what it is they want you to do. And they're usually trying to do it with somebody who hasn't got any understanding or any expertise in the field in the first place. This is the dilemma of the HR industry. It's human resources, it's not about skills. Understanding skills is a difficult aspect. Businesses just don't get how to identify skills. They don't know how to regulate them. They don't know how to assess them in the people who are applying. They don't know what people are doing that are working for them already. And it all starts with the fact that they don't know what the people that work for them do. And so it's like, luckily there are companies coming along these days that are addressing this as an issue, but it is, and we address it from the point of view for the company.
Just maybe would be a hint to Jerry on how he might deal with this thing of not having a particular skill.
Yeah.
I saw a great ad for a post, a very senior post within the Department of Agriculture based in Washington recently, and on the list of desirables there was to have or be quickly able to acquire.
Yes.
That'd be fine.
The following skills. And therefore, if you didn't have them, you could say, right, I haven't actually used JDE, but I have used Article. They're very similar.
Yeah.
You know, and it wouldn't take me long to
upskill or
upskill or to
yes,
change. You know.
And if you have the level of knowledge to express the fact that they are very similar and that they actually are involved in the same function, then you're past HR already.
Yeah, but you haven't got. I was working always on a contract basis in these companies type of thing, so I was never exposed to the big stuff type of thing. You know, there's a problem in the area, you solve that, Jerry. The next other problem, that stuff that they didn't want at the time. It's too for manpower resources type of thing. It's just too time consuming. Get somebody in to do it. You know?
Bring somebody on a contract to do
That
outsource it.
sounds more like the type of thing that Ross deals with on the fact that often people. Far be it from me to say that you would be wrong in how you write your CV, but I have an 8-page long CV, along with all the other explanations here about why I didn't get a job. That's how I do in interviews. The 8-page CV doesn't help either, because the fact that I write that because I want them to know everything about me so that they can make a decision. There are ways in which you address the roles that you've been in and then the level of knowledge in a CV so that people in HR can pick it up and that people in line management can read it. It is specific to each one of the industries that you're in, and sometimes there are some people out there that can help you. Some of them are recruitment consultants, some of them are coaches, but you have to be really careful about your selection process when you go through to do it. We sat down with somebody recently, and a brilliant person, who's going off and getting jobs. That's the worst thing. Forget this whole thing about going through the application process and not getting them, but getting jobs and then getting let go.
Yeah.
And that's hard as hell for somebody, and the reason is because the experience on the CV and what was being talked through in the interview, making nice impressions and everything, and then getting there,
very well
not
coached.
having the skills for the job, because that isn't the job that they should have been applying for in the first place.
Just one other thing, companies, let's say leadership skills or team building and that type of thing. you put them down in the CV, type of thing, they're kind of washy-wishy type stuff.
They're not.
Well,
They're very not.
no, but the point I'm trying to make is, why don't the companies themselves run, like, if you join the Army or the Navy, the American Army or Navy or Air Force type of thing, they bring you on military tactics and battleships or whatever, they bring you out and they do war simulations and stuff, and you learn it in computers, you learn it in real life, type of thing, before you become a commander of a ship, and say, because I booked the battleship in the night. It's pretty good film actually, yeah, I was brilliant. But anyway, you know, they've got the right technique type of thing. Says, well, we'll bring competent people in and they can walk, talk, and speak. Okay, you're hired. Then we'll train you, we'll show you, and bring out the leadership skills. Say, oh, you know something, you're not that high in leadership, but you're very good on technical aspects, or Edwards, or you're great upstairs on the control room or something type of thing. So they find the skill sets that they have.
And a lot of organizations do.
But they're training, yeah, they're weeding you out and you're training, and then those don't cut it, and sure they can make the cut there, you know. But that to me is a better technique. And they've recognised it, and here we have, you know, the armies and navies and wars, these organisations are too.
There are organisations that do that. Like if you look at, for example, the Big Four, in terms of the accountancy firms, every year they go out and they hire graduates. They hire hundreds of graduates for their trainee program. So they'll bring in 100 graduates on 3 to 4 year contracts on the proviso that they will end up with 30 qualified accountants at the end of it. And those accountants, because they've come through their system and they've had years where they've spent time in internal audit or they've spent time in risk management, they can then assess their skills over a period of time and push them into the right departments within the organisation. The problem is most companies, the skill set shortage is at a higher level. And you mentioned one thing there in terms of team building and management, and that's an area that right across the board it's one of the skills that is probably most important and least taught. You know, I came from a recruitment agency background, and I spent 3 years in Hayes. I got promoted to manager because I was the best recruiter in my team, not because I was able to manage anybody. Now, if you think about this logically, there's two terrible things that's happened here. One, you've put somebody in who may or may not have any man management skills. But the second thing you've done is you've now weakened the team by taking my focus away from recruiting and putting it into doing something else. The civil service did the same thing. They used to say, right, well, whoever's there the longest, let's promote them. What? You know, so it's the most under-taught area.
You missed the third problem. Now there's a bunch of you running around.
That's a whole other problem. But you're dead right. It is a fundamental flaw. Yes, sorry.
Speaking to the same point, it's a problem with the difference between the U.S. military, accounting firms, law firms, so forth. They have you. I mean, with the government, with the U.S. military, you're called a GI because it's a government issue. They own you for 4 years.
Yeah.
I mean, the same thing with the accounting firms, same thing with the law firms. You're going, until you get that license, until you get that qualification, they own you. So they can afford to invest in you because they know you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, if they invest a year in you and you say, well, great, you built up my skills, I'm worth X, Y, and Z, because you don't have to stay on. You can just pop off. It's when there's the investment to actually stay with you.
And it's part of the problem that, and you touched on it earlier on, is that a lot of the work that you were doing when you were in on contract, they didn't train you in the other stuff.
No.
And the reason they didn't is because you're a contractor, so therefore, why would I upskill a contractor? That just makes him more expensive the next time I need to hire him. And that's the
to go to a competition across the road or whatever, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to help somebody else. I'm not going to train somebody up who's then going to lead my organization, because that's seen as a waste. They don't want to invest. All right. They don't want to invest in somebody who they don't see has a long-term future within the organization. Is the truth of it. Unfortunately, oftentimes companies don't want to invest in people enough anyway. But that's a whole other day's discussion.
Long.
Okay. Right. I think everybody needs a coffee.
Yeah.
We're finished questions. Yeah. Anybody else? No. Brilliant. Okay.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Rob, any time, if you have any other questions as well.